Awesome. Thanks, Dan. And thanks, Aki and Mural, and also for Butter. And yeah, thank you everyone for turning up today. I'm really looking forward to it. Should be a good chat. So look, I'm just going to share my screen. Oops. There we go. I love doing a talk like this and using a platform that you've never used before. Should be fun.
Okay.
Anyway, it's just loading, so hopefully you'll be able to see that in a second. There we go, the suspense. There we go. Thumbs up. Test out the emojis or reactions. Fantastic. Let's jump into it. Now, look, I'm going to hopefully everyone's had their... Can we go straight to the bar? Rightio, so we're going to talk about cracking the toughest phase of design thinking. I'm not really a big one for traditional title pages, so I hope you've all had your coffees this morning. I notice we've got some people from India, a few hours behind there, but I reckon it's coffee o'clock over there. So what I'd love you to do, chuck in the chat. What's the brand for this insight? What's the brand or product? Okay, so you've got an indulgent foodie needs guaranteed satisfaction because if the delivered pleasure falls short of the expectation, it doesn't justify the guilt. So which brand or product is this insight for? So hopefully you've all located the chat. Eleanor's typing. Amanda's going for Lint. Not a bad guess. Chocolate, yeah, it's got chocolate on it. Dove. Go on, Dan, what's the other brand name? Cookie, Cadbury, Kinder. Excellent. Oh, look, you're all so close. No one's got it yet. I think Dan was the closest. Green and Blacks. Yeah, Whittaker's. Thanks, Debbie. I'm a Kiwi, so yeah, definitely Whittaker's would come up there. Okay. I think you've all had one of these before, yeah? Magnum. So that's the insight behind Magnum. Let's try again. I think this one will be a bit easier. So a young, outgoing male needs to feel, look, and smell good, because the dating game is a major preoccupation for him. Excellent. Yeah, Lynx or Axe, depending on where you are from in the world. Fantastic. And third one, this is a little bit harder, okay? So traveling harried father of 3 needs to keep track of his children because the airport feels out of control and full of unknowns. Not that we've been to any airports lately. Any thoughts on this one? Carver, I like that. Circle. Any more? Could be McDonald's, couldn't it, at the airport? We've got a playground of that. Oh, awesome. Great work, Liz. Those ride-on suitcases. Yeah, Tonki. Fantastic. And look, the point here is that, you know, insight drives and creates great innovations, but it's actually the inspiration for, you know, all marketing, design, and actually business activities. You shouldn't really be doing anything without a good customer and insight. And so that's what we'll talk about today. So we're going to go through a little bit on why insight is so important. And I'm not just talking about data when I use the word insight. And then we're going to go through some key highlights from my book. So a couple of chapters, Discover and then Distil. And we're going to throw in a few surprises. We're going to jump into Mural at some stage. And then we'll have a little bit of a Q&A. So why insight? I like to start with this slide first. So look, design thinking is becoming very mainstream. Depends where you are in the world. I'd say in Australia right now, we're somewhere in the majority, I'd say. I'd say most organisations and teams are using it or have used it. And then, you know, depending where you are in the world, you might be further ahead in that adoption curve or you might be a little bit further behind. So that gives us some interesting context because whilst it's mainstream, it hasn't really improved our innovation success rates. So no matter who you talk to, we're not that successful at innovating. And so why is that? We've got all these new methodologies like design thinking. Why are we still not improving those rates? And the main reason is because more ideas fail from a lack of customers than actually a failure of the product or technology. So we need to focus more on the who, being the customer, and the why, their needs, than the what. But why do we do this? You know, it's pretty much because we love, as human beings, jumping to solution. And so in a study of 2,000 innovation projects by Robert Cooper, who is also the inventor of the stage gate system, they found the number one reason was a lack of thoroughness in identifying real needs and insights in the marketplace, with innovation teams often making assumptions to justify the project. Yeah? So we've come up with some cool shit, and then we invent some insights to back that up. So the number one reason innovation isn't successful is because we aren't yet good enough at insight, even though we've got methodologies like design thinking. So I'm sure you're all familiar with desirability, feasibility, and viability. What I love about this diagram is talking about where we actually often start. You know, we often start with, hey, what's some cool shit I can make, which is feasibility. And then we go and build a bogus business case, which says, yeah, we can make money from this. And then we launch it, and that's when we do our desirability, you know, and it's only then when we launch it we find out if anyone actually likes it, and that can be too late. Maybe a quick with your reactions. Can you do a raise your hand or what if you own a Segway? Anyone own a Segway? Dan does. Amazing. I thought there would have been more. Oh, Dan's got 2 Segways. So it's quite an interesting story. The guy who came up with the Segway, you know, crazy inventor, very clever, started in that feasibility circle, you know, what's some cool shit I can make? Came up with the Segway. He was so worried about someone copying it that through the whole innovation process, he, you know, just squirreled away in his garage, didn't share it with anybody. And then even when it came to launching it, he didn't want anyone else to, you know, somehow copy it quickly and launch it. So he got a whole lot of his inventor friends to talk to the media. And he said, look, tell them anything you want about it, but just not what it is. You know, tell them that cities are going to be redesigned around it. Tell them that's the best thing since sliced bread. So they did this. And then they actually launched it to the Joe public like ourselves. And everyone's like, oh, wow, that looks cool. Can we have some applause, please? And then, do you want one? No, thanks. You're a bit slow there. Thank you. And then it's like, do you want one? No, I've got a mountain bike, or I've got a skateboard, or I've got a scooter. And yes, it has led to some new technologies, but has anyone seen a city that's been redesigned around the Segway? Probably not. Yeah, you can see them at tourist resorts, Channel 9 camera people trying to get some, good shots on them, and that's about it. Who owns a Dyson? Yeah? Lots of people. Yeah, people are pretty proud about their Dyson. You should be if you pay over $500 for a vacuum cleaner. So what did James Dyson do? How is he different from the inventor of Segway? He started in that top circle, desirability, didn't he? Understood, what are the current consumer problems with vacuuming? And if you're old enough like me, you can remember emptying those dirty, dusty bags. And the other thing is as the bag got full, the vacuum cleaner started to lose suction. So he started with a couple of important customer needs or pain points, and then innovated from there and actually ran several thousand experiments to make it feasible and viable. Yeah. So the point is, we know DVF, but we're still failing in innovation because we know it, but we're doing something wrong in that desirability circle. And so I want to share a little bit on that today. So I hope I've showed insight generation is the most important phase of design thinking, and that's where discover and distill come together, or depending, the model you use or where you're taught, it might be empathize and frame, etc. But it's those first 2 stages. But it's also the toughest phase, but we can crack it. So what do I mean by an insight? So there's a great quote there from an old colleague of mine, Stephen Melford. to me, it's that underlying why behind a customer's need, and it's inspiration for innovation. Put together this framework, which I like sharing, to share what we mean by needs and insights. So you've got functional needs, you've got emotional and social needs, and you've got insight. So functional needs, they're basic needs rooted in logic. Emotional and social needs are more feelings and conditions, and insight's the underlying why. I'll give you a corny example. So, a functional need might be, I'm feeling tired, I need a coffee. But then where I go to get that coffee, I might go somewhere that I think's cool. But why do I need to be cool? Well, it's because I've got 3 young kids, and going to the cafe is only time for me to have some adult time or pretend I'm still young at heart. So they're the sort of difference to those 3 levels. Now, the really interesting thing is if you go out and talk to or observe some customers, they'll tell you what their functional needs are. They know them and they'll talk about them. Getting to the emotional and social needs, though, is really interesting because they know them, but they don't often share them. They're the sort of things that, take a glass of wine or a glass of beer or something like that to actually get it out of them. And so that's what is one of the things that makes it tough. And then in terms of insight, they don't go, here's a platter of insights. You've really got to dig down to those because they're unknown to them. And it requires some interpretation from yourselves. So to get to those emotional and social needs, we can't always use alcohol. And, I'm not condoning everyone should drink either. I've actually been trying out some zero-free beer. What's it called? Heaps Good? Has anyone tried that? No, Heaps Normal. Yeah, because the next day you feel heaps normal. Anyway, so to get to that known spoken, if you can't, loosen their lips with a few drinks, then you've got to ask some really good questions and use projection techniques. Yeah, so you're asking why to get to that emotional driver. And then to get to the insight, you're really trying to understand why is that need so important or so hard to solve. Yeah. And that's probably my top tip today. If you've got to go and have lunch now, I joke, but it's those last 2. I reckon cracking an insight is about understanding why is that need so important or why is it so hard to solve. We'll talk more on that later. So we can find out functional needs and emotional and social needs through the discover phase or empathy stage. And then it's up to us as, marketers, designers, innovators, etc., business people, working in government, to then distill why is it so important or why is it so hard to solve based on the time we've spent with them. However, sometimes we find when we're in an insights workshop, we're also having to distill a bit what their emotional and social needs are. And once again, I think that's okay if you can infer that based on what you know of them, as long as you're not making it up. So that's just some scene setting. What I want to get into now is the discovery stage, and then we'll jump into the distill stage. Are there any questions so far? All good.
No questions are a bad thing, though. Well, there should be some questions. Well, loving it. We've got a loving it. That's not a question, that's a statement. Oh, it makes sense. All right, sorry. I'll let you have your little drink break. Go.
All good. So one of my bugbears with empathy maps is people think you can brainstorm what customers' needs are. Yeah. So brainstorming customer need doesn't make empathy. And I've seen so many, video blogs, etc., like that, where they, this is how you use an empathy map. Now we just go and make up, what their needs, pains, and gains are and things like that. Yeah. So let's hold off on using the empathy map until, as Steve Blank, the grandfather of startup land, until we get out of the building and actually spend time with our customers and spend time where they live. So why do we want to do empathy and empathetic research, apart from understanding our customers and not making them up in the ivory tower? It really motivates teams. So whenever we go out with our team, with our clients' teams or whatever, they come back so motivated from the stage. They really want to help solve these problems and satisfy these needs for their customers. And it's just so meaningful and so motivating. Even if you're using, expert qualitative researchers, I still recommend going out with them and, even doing some of the interviews and observational work yourself. So look, I just want to share a little example. Some of you may have heard this. It's a fairly famous one. It's from Stanford D-School. So up at Stanford. Now, they set up the D-School. So, you go to Stanford and you go and do your law degree or your finance degree or something like that. By that stage, you're getting a bit bored. So you want to go and do some design thinking papers. So you shoot across campus to the D-School or Institute of Design at Stanford. They get a lot of funding. They work on a lot of social challenges. So one of the briefs they got was from Nepal. And it was, how might we design a low-cost incubator that could help save premature babies born into poverty, especially in developing countries. So at least one of the teams went out to Nepal. They went and visited the hospitals, of course, which is what you do. And one of the first things they noticed when they got to the hospitals is most of the incubators were empty. And they're like, well, what's going on here? What do they need, some better or low cost or more incubators if they're not even using them? So they spoke to some doctors and nurses, and what they found is a lot of the babies are born out in the villages. So this one team went out to a village and, I spoke to some of the parents, and speaking to a mother who had a premature baby. She went to the village clinic, and the clinic said, look, you've got to get to the city. You've got to get to a hospital where your baby won't survive. And look, unfortunately, the baby didn't survive. So what this team realized is it wasn't really about low cost. It was a transportation issue. These people didn't have the means to get their babies to hospitals and for them to survive that journey. So what they invented was this really cute, and if that doesn't make you smile or cry, then maybe you're missing a little bit of empathy, this really cute cross between a survival blanket and a sleeping bag. And it has a wax type pellet that can go on the back, which doesn't burn the baby, and it can be heated up using the facilities they have in the villages. And it's also low cost, but that's sort of, by the by. And it's now saving lots of premature babies that are born into poverty and that are, premature. Now, if we'd stayed in Stanford and San Fran or whatever, a bunch of engineers and problem solvers, we could have come up with a low-cost incubator, but it actually wouldn't have solved the real problem. So by doing this discovery work and then distilling, we can find out what the real problem is that really needs to be solved. So how do we do that? There's there's lots of techniques. There's three we like to use. So I'm going to talk you through them, using multiple sources of insight, talking to extreme users, and a little bit of deprivation and disruption. So one we love is this multiple sources framework. So if you're going to go and do empathetic research, you can go and actually be the customer. You can go and experience the customer experience from their viewpoint, or experience the experience they experience, sorry. You can go and be with the customer so you can observe them and then go and talk to them. And you can learn about the customer by talking to people around them. So, we've done the experience the customer has. I don't know if there's any people here from Les Mills today. I know a couple of them are going to turn up. Many years ago, they got us to work with them to help redesign the body pump experience. So, fitness to music. So we went through the whole process of, registering for the class, going through the changing rooms, getting to the class. And I don't know if any of you have done body pump or step. You got to get all the product, and you got to go and set up your place on the floor. And, if you're a newbie, there's so many bits to have, and you're running late and stuff like that. And then, being with the customer, we've probably all done, gone shopping with customers, we've cooked with customers, things like that. And then you interview them afterwards around the things you see. And then learning about them, this doesn't have to be experts. Many years ago, the organisation I was working with were relaunching Brill Cream, which obviously needed a relaunch. And rather than just talk to the guys they were targeting, they also talked to their partners, because their partners were more likely to tell them stuff about the guys' grooming habits than the guys would, yeah? So, you know, that makes a lot of sense. And I mean, this was 10 years ago, so we weren't as, say, metrosexual as we are now. So they were a bit cagey about what their grooming habits were. So that's your mainstream customers. You can also talk to extreme users, and that's really interesting. Why I love talking to extreme users is because any of the needs or pain points are really heightened for them. So it's a lot easier to uncover things that your mainstream customers wouldn't have mentioned otherwise, but would still be relevant. So I'll give you a bit of an example. There's a kitchenware brand called Xylus. They design really, you know, fantastic kitchenware products. We've got one of their potato peelers. Anyway, they got some grandchildren and grandparents together to do some cooking and baking. And one of the things they did is they got them to bake some pizzas. And so anyway, they're cutting the pizzas up afterwards. You know, you got the pizza cutter and you're pushing along like this. And especially if you overcook your pizza base a little bit, it's quite hard to cut through. And so you're wanting to put some more weight on it. But you can't, because if you put more weight on it, you know, your hand would go right through the blade. So through that observation, what they did is they redesigned the pizza cutter so you can push down with two hands. So that was only by observing extreme users. Now you go, okay, kids aren't going to buy pizza cutters. They don't have any money. You know, grandparents aren't going to buy a new one. They're stuck in their ways. But the thing is even, you know, everyday people, say ourselves, would still like to cut the pizza a lot easier. So you often get your insights from the extremes, but then you still innovate for the mainstream. So I love using the multiple sources framework and love talking to extreme users. The other two I mentioned were deprivation and disruption. So you can actually be quite creative in the discovery phase. So to, once again, heighten the experience so the pain points and needs really come to the top of the surface, you can use deprivation techniques where you take a regular activity, product or brand away from them. You know, once again, back in the UK when we're working on Weet-Bix, or Weetabix is it? You know, we stopped people who were, you know, Weet-Bix fans eating Weet-Bix for a week. And so we interviewed them at the start of the week about what they loved about Weet-Bix, and then at the end of the week when they hadn't had them for a week. And we got so much more information at the end of the week than we did at the start of the week. Disruption's another one. So back before, you know, husband or wife swap was even around, we were doing some projects for a homeware brand, and we got some people to swap houses with their friends. So once again, we interviewed them before they moved. What do they love about their home, etc., and all about the category we're working on. And then we got them to move homes, to swap homes with friends. And then we interviewed them during, at the end of that house swap. And it was amazing. They remembered things they loved about their own home, and also what they hated about their home, what they loved about their friend's home, and what they hated about their friend's home. So we got all these new insights that we wouldn't have got otherwise. So 3 great techniques, you know, multiple sources framework, using extreme users, deprivation and disruption. So that's a little bit on discover phase and what, you know, over the last few years, I say we've used, you know, working with many other qualitative researchers and user research, etc. It's hard, but you can do it really well. This next bit's even tougher, and that's the distill phase. So we've got all these observations. We may have some quant data, but, you know, it's not enough. We've got to unpack it. We've got to synthesize it. We've got to connect it. We've got to make sense of it. So this is the process we use. So we unpack all our observations. I'm calling them observations. You know, it could be what they told you, into an empathy map. I really like I don't know if it's the traditional one, but the say, do, think, feel. My view is, you know, the you know, needs, pains and gains, or, you know, jobs to be done, pains and gains is good too. But I feel like it's already half synthesized it for you. So I like to use this one, start a bit cleaner. Then we'll synthesize that into, look, what's really interesting, what's standing out, and then we'll prioritize those. And then we'll craft these customer need insight statements, but like user stories or points of view. And then finally, we use a few different techniques to test and check, have we got a really compelling insight that inspires action and leads to growth. So look, I'm jumping a few steps now to then crafting these insight statements. So this is the customer insight construct I really like to use. I was a brand manager or product manager at Unilever on ice cream, which is pretty cool, 21 years ago. And we had something very similar to this, and I love it. And I know Distil use it and others as well. So we like to describe the customer, the need, and the insight. So for the customer, a rich and specific description of the customer and their context. And context is really important. And Clayton Christensen, talks a lot about that, or did talk a lot about that, but it's in some of his books on jobs to be done and things like that. In the need or problem that they're trying to solve or satisfy, and then the insight, which we've talked a bit on so far. So if we go back to this innovation, so this is the exact customer need insight or point of view, they call it at Stanford, that led to that product. What you'll notice there, desperate and a poorly mother. So it isn't a persona, it isn't a segment. We're talking about one person, but they know it's relevant to many others. Needs to keep premature baby warm in the early hours. So this isn't an English lesson, and you wouldn't want one from a Kiwi. But needs are verbs. So you'll know when you've put a solution in there, baked a solution in there, because it will be a noun, I believe. And then the insight, because she doesn't have the means to bring her baby to a hospital. So what I want to highlight here is there's a few tips there, but it's number 2 that's really important, and this is where we can go wrong. So the insight should not simply be a reason for the need, but why the need is so important to the customer or so hard to solve. So I keep saying that. That's my little bit of gold that I've learned over 20 years of working with many others in this area. Because if we go from the need to keep premature baby warm in the early hours and had a reason for the need, you go because I want my baby to live. And whilst that's important, it's not insightful, because of course they do. But you wouldn't have come up with that solution probably. We probably wouldn't have. But this insight is, as it says, insightful. And if we were brainstorming ideas for this, in addition to the solution Stanford come up with, we'd be like, oh, we need some transportation. We need some, community or village vans or something that take these mothers and their premature babies to the cities. So that to me is one of the key things when we're generating these insights. So I'll give you another example. Many years ago, we were doing some work for a food company, generating snack ideas for primary school age children and also for high school. So we did some observation work too, obviously with permission and all that. So here's one example. So a 6-year-old schoolgirl needs to eat her morning tea because food is vital to concentration. And look, we would all know that. We all agree to that. But it's not actually that insightful. So we can be more descriptive about this person. So she was a very playful and active 6-year-old schoolgirl. A lot of her friends are already on the jungle gyms or monkey bars. Her need is for morning tea that can be eaten quickly or on the move, because playing is more important at recess than sitting down to finish her food. Yeah? So the first is really just a statement of fact, whereas the second one's a lot more intriguing, it's a lot more interesting, it's a lot more exciting, and it inspires you to think of more ideas and to innovate. And it's also true. So often what we find when we're working with teams, and I do this myself as well, we come up with those blue level insights, and then we've got to work on them to get to the yellow level. And that's what really unlocks innovation. And that's also why I say this is the hardest phase of design thinking. So some things you can do. So obviously you can ask why to get to the insight, but remember, it's not just the reason for the need. Why is the need so hard to solve? Why is it so important? And you can use words like surprisingly, because, but, and so that to force that interpretation, because it is an interpretation. So that's it. This is a nice little technique. Another one from Distil. You know, I do love their work. I was lucky enough to work with them a few years ago. So it's just a nice way, I find, at the end of workshops to get people to tidy up their customer need insights and, you know, to enforce them in a nice way to capture it and really distill it. So, yeah, take a screenshot of that if you whatever, and use that. But yeah, definitely referencing Distil there. And so, yeah, so that's pretty much the journey. So in Distil, we do storytell, which is unpacking into the empathy map, which I touched on. We do some synthesis, which I didn't share. And we prioritize those. So, you know, we had hundreds of sticky notes there. So you'd want to prioritize them down, what's really interesting. And then we craft those statements, which we just did. And then you do a bit of a test and check to decide which ones you want to take through to ideation.